Greetings, everyone. It's good to see everybody again. Happy to be here and to answer some questions for you once again. So maybe we'll just jump right into it here and get rolling. How does that sound? Good. Okay, here we go. First question from Nigel Macy. Are there any legal ramifications I need to be aware of if I choose to purchase a .com from someone or from a company like GoDaddy for my own business? I'm looking for a .com for a massage business. I found one available. It's for sale at an investment of almost $300. I also found the business name with an LLC behind it in another state. Okay, so I'm no legal expert on these matters, but I have dealt with this before. So you're talking basically about a trademark when you talk about a domain name. And so if you found another business that has a similar name in another state, it depends on how active they are with it, right? So if they're very active and they're like an operating business and they have the potential to expand nationally and yakety schmackety, and that might be a problem at some point, then you might want to worry about it. If it's connected to an LLC that's not really being used for anything and you can't search it and find it anywhere, then you're probably fine. So what I would do is just Google around a little bit for this other company around and see maybe they were in business a while ago and maybe they went out of business, in which case don't worry about it. I believe the rules on this sort of stuff is if you are actively using the trademark or whatever for an extended period of time and you were the first one to be using it and the other company came after you, like in a later time, then you would then they would have precedent essentially for using it, even if they didn't file any paperwork or if they just by the fact that they use it gives them some credibility. That said, if you jump into it and you start using it and you become the one who really builds and builds and builds and makes it into something great, it probably doesn't really matter anyway if they're not a significant operation or looking like they're going to become a significant operation. As far as the actual just logistics of getting a hold of it, I've done some of those deals through GoDaddy. I've done them also privately. I would just say just be careful. If you go through GoDaddy, you're probably fine. If you go through a private person and you have to do kind of the exchange, sometimes it's worth using an escrow company or making sure that there's a handoff that happens before you exchange the money, that sort of thing, because there are some scams out there. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it as long as you can Google around and not find someone else utilizing the domain or trademark or whatever you have in mind. That's probably the best way to go. We did that with our big hot dog company beforehand. Just did some Googling around to find out if anyone else had done it before and they hadn't. So anyway, okay, next one. Adam Drake asked the question, as I add people to my organization, how do you get everyone to fully utilize our CRM? I want a high CRM usage so I can analyze firm-wide data. I understand the benefit for me as the owner, but what's in it for the user to spend time updating their CRM? Or how can I convince them it is time well spent? I want to see if clients are being serviced, if our pipeline is growing, if our close rate is changing, and if other trends emerge. I own an investment advisory firm and manage a team of financial advisors. I'm doing training videos on the CRM, so if I get adoption, at least I know people will use the CRM correctly. We will be hiring an admin soon. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that you're using a CRM or that you're trying to use a CRM, and it's for all the reasons that you said. That's an important thing. So getting people to update the CRM is like the number one problem that big companies have as well. It's not like that this is unique to someone who's just starting out with their new system. So the first thing that jumps to mind with it is that if you're so first, make sure you've got your standard operating procedures clear. Like it sounds like you do because you're going to make these videos, but make sure it's really buttoned up so that everyone understands exactly how to use it. So it sounds like you're good there. Great. Next thing, with salespeople in particular, the thing that always is a challenge is that salespeople a lot of times don't realize the value of data and the value of numbers. And so sometimes it's worth the effort to try to train them, not from a like how to do it or that I want you to do it perspective, but almost from like a philosophical perspective or cultural perspective within your company, to show them why it's valuable. Like actually like take the time to show them the show them the books, show them the accounting that's related to this. Show them why how the numbers flow through. Like I don't know how sophisticated your group of people are in that regard, but make sure that they understand how a conversion rate works, right? And how if you track your conversion rate and you track your messaging and you do all the necessary steps, how that's going to result in more business for them and how that's going to result in more money for them. But you can't help them do that unless they keep all the data up to date. I'm working with a hotel group, which I might have mentioned at some point, I don't remember. We're working with a hotel group right now. We're redesigning their sales department into kind of a standalone sales team, so that they were kind of spread out throughout the company. Now they're centralized. And so the first thing we did for the first 2 months was really just focus on kind of the structure of what it is and how we want our business to be run. And when I say our business, I've really got them focused on that the sales activities that they do is their business. Like I talk to them like entrepreneurs. They're employees, but I talk to them like entrepreneurs. We talk about value. We talk about value to them, to the customer, to the company. We talk about data and the value of data and how data can show us if we're profitable or not, or how to become more profitable. So we spent a lot of time working on that as a group, just kind of conceptually, before we even got into any of the nitty gritty of how we're actually going to do any of it. In fact, with this group, we didn't. They designed the system, the standard operating procedures that go into all of this. I didn't design it. I just kind of gave them the overview and kind of the structure, and then I went to them and said, okay, well, what's the most efficient way to do this? What's the most efficient way to gather this data? So that might actually be a good suggestion in this case. It sounds like you have a lot of, you know what you want to collect from your perspective. Get them involved in that conversation at this stage. Don't just hand it to them and just go, here you go. That's one of the things I'm really guilty of. I've been more than once, it's been pointed out to me that I don't explain the way that I think. Like I just think through things very deeply, and then I just give everyone kind of the surface answer. And so like in this particular case, that might be something that could be helpful here is to think through it with them. Let them be part of the decision-making process. Let them be part of the design process, because then at that point, they've put the input in, so now they're part of it. Like, so if they don't do it, it was their own thing. They said they wanted to do it, so let them buy into it like that. And that also helps when you hire new people, because then that's part of your culture now. Now everyone else who's there, if they train other people or they show other people, or they just, the expectation is, hey, we built this ourselves. We can work on it together, and we can actually execute it together and stay committed to it. So then it's not just you policing it, the whole group is policing it. So I would say those two things. So show them how it connects to value to them, both literally and kind of like philosophically, and then let them have input into the design of how it's going to work, because they might have better ideas than you do. More heads is better than none, right? Okay, so next question. Gabriel Chaparro. Once you have created your unique service in what we think would be a blue ocean industry, how do you determine the pricing when there is no competition to even form a baseline? I am a day trader that also provides entry and exit signals to our subscribers with the direct messaging. When we enter a trade, we go to the channel and type out the trade's detailed information. Usually we form the alerts on a template to keep the channel organized. We ended up creating a software that automates the entire message composition to be posted into a template and sent to our channel. So basically, we linked a trading platform to a mass messaging platform. Cool. Amongst other capabilities, the software saves us tons of time and tedious work. We now plan to sell this software to signal providers like myself. I'm asking this question because I have read the articles on calculating the price of a service, but most of them advise me to look at a competitor and to know my market. In my situation, I have not found a competitor. Okay, cool. Great question. I love it. And I think the thing that's cool about this question is that the answer to the question is embedded in the question itself. So I want to just kind of reiterate, the thing with pricing is that it's based on value to the customer, right? So like think about it for yourself. You have a willingness to pay for a particular service, and your willingness to pay is based on your perceived value of what that is. How much value is that going to derive for you? And if the value is not greater than the amount you're willing to pay, then you're not going to buy. So pricing has to be set in such a way that the market price is always going to be a little bit lower than the value that you provide, right? So like, because people aren't going to pay more than the value that you provide, they're only going to pay less than the value that you provide. So you need to know what the value is that you provide. So the idea of looking at competition is fine, but where did that price come from originally, right? That's the question. Where did that price come from originally? And the answer is that somebody along the line figures out, well, how much value does this service actually provide? And in your question here, you said it saves tons of time and tedious work. So what I would suggest is I would calculate what the time and tedious work is worth in real dollars. So like the nice thing about this example is sometimes when you figure out pricing stuff like this, you have to take into account kind of like additional revenue or additional things that are maybe a little bit more ambiguous and hard to figure out. In this case, it's an easy one because it's just the time and tedious work. That's really all you need to calculate. So go back to your drawing board and figure out, well, after we implemented this software, we cut this many hours doing this many hours doing that, add it all up, attach it a realistic hourly rate as if you were paying an outside person to do that. If it's just an admin type work, maybe use like $15 or $20 an hour. If it's a more sophisticated type work, like you have to have an MBA or something, maybe use $50 an hour or $75 an hour. I don't know. Pick a number that makes sense that someone in your industry would be paying for someone else to do that work, and you just eliminated it with the software. Add all that up, whatever that number is, divide that out over some period of time, whether it's a monthly basis or however you're doing your pricing, and then that's basically what your customer will do. They'll do the same thing, whether they know it or not. That's what they're doing in their head. And then just set your price somewhere below that number. And of course, the more below you set it, the more likely people will immediately jump on it and not think too hard about it. So if you know that it's saving $500 a month and you charge $100, you're going to catch a lot of people really fast. If you know that it's saving $500 a month and you charge $495, you might not grab people quite as fast, but they can still make $5 on the investment with you. So that's a good way to think of pricing, whether it's this business or any other. So I'd encourage everyone to always calculate the value of what they actually do for their client, and then set your price somewhere underneath that. And then, of course, the bigger spread that you make or between the price and the value you're providing, then you're going to give more value to the client, in which case they're going to be more likely and it'll be easier for them to make the decision to buy. Good question. I like that one. All right, next question from Brad Coleman. What are strategies I can use with business partners to be sure we perform our roles correctly without creating conflict? I have a business partner who has some equity in my company. I feel as if I'm still doing everything needed on the day-to-day startup process. How can I start the conversation that I need help getting things off the ground without demanding help hurting the business relationship? Any advice on team building, even when they don't work for you, but with you? Team engagement needed, encouragement to the leader without hurting others' feelings. All right, this is a good question. So I can tell you a story about my business partner and I, in one of our businesses. We just rearranged everything for this exact purpose. So she wanted to take a more hands-on role in the business, and I wanted to take a more strategic role with less day-to-day activity. And so we'd been together as business partners for, I guess, about 5 years. And then we noticed how we kind of worked together and how we had these kind of different ways of looking at things. And so at this point, we said, you know what, it's going to be better for the business if I give up some of my equity, because we were 50-50. 50-50 is always kind of a dangerous thing anyway, because it's never really 50-50. Someone's always doing more of the day-to-day work, which of course people can get resentful of. So in our case, we split, instead of being 50-50, she bought out 30% of my 50-50. So now I'm 20%, she's 80% in terms of the equity and in terms of the way we split up shareholder distributions and all that stuff. So that's one way to literally just have the conversation of like, look, if I'm doing all the day-to-day work, we can't be 50-50, and that's fine. I don't need your help. I don't want your help if that isn't the right thing for you. Like, I wouldn't waste a lot of time trying to get someone to help you that doesn't want to help you, or that wants, or that has a different skill set. Find the person with the right skill set. If it's not your partner, then find somebody else. Like, and that's fine. Both of you should be happy about that, because really the success should come from the business, not from the fact that you guys, you want the business to be successful. It doesn't matter how it becomes successful. So I wouldn't be afraid to have those conversations and just be super candid about it. There shouldn't be any hurt feelings. This is business, right? We all want the same thing, business to succeed. So no hurt feelings. It should really just be about how are we going to get all this work done that needs to get done, and what's the most advantageous and fair way to do that. The other thing that you can do in this situation, and again, I don't know how this exactly helps, because I don't know if it's money that's the concern or if it's activity, or maybe a little of both, is break up. This is actually true of any business relationship where there's equity involved. Break up your ownership and your working in the business. Like, don't think of those are two completely different things, totally separate from each other. So you and your partner have that conversation. Be like, okay, we're owners in this business. We each own it 50-50. I'm assuming it's 50-50. I don't know. But we own it 50-50. So now what does that mean? Well, it means that both of us cannot work in the business at all. And then, since it's a small business, nothing will happen. Or we can hire somebody to work in the business, and that'll cost us $80,000 a year. So we're each going to have to pump in $40,000, and we'll hire this person for a year, and hopefully they can become cash flow positive in a year. That's an option, right? But now you're strictly talking as investors, as people who own equity, not as people who own equity and are working in the business. You're talking two separate things. So if you say, okay, well, we want to hire somebody, but we don't want to put the money in. So I'm willing to invest my time. This is what you'd say. I'm willing to invest my time in lieu of the $40,000 from each of us to try to get this business off the ground. And as such, my expectation is that I'm going to be able to build myself into a fair wage for the work that I do. So if it's $80,000, I'm not going to distribute any money out of this business until I'm clearly making $80,000 and we've put reserves away and we've done all these things. So really separate out your hat that you wear when you're an equity owner and the hat that you wear when you're working in the business. Separate those two things out, assign the value of the work in the business, and then make sure that work in the business is compensated before any equity splits. So then what might end up happening out of that conversation is that you might work out some deal like, okay, fine, well, you can earn up to $80,000, whatever the number is, before there's any expectation of distributions or anything. You might also make the argument like, well, hey, if I'm building this thing from scratch and you're not building it, then what did you do to, bring your equity into it? And not to say that maybe they did a lot earlier on and now we're just at the point like I just said, where maybe it needs to be renegotiated. Maybe you have to buy, in my partner's case, she had to buy out that 30%. There was value there that she had to pay for. And I didn't want to sell more than that either, by the way. I didn't want to sell out completely. I wanted to stay involved as an equity owner and as a strategic advisor to the company, because I feel like I can provide a lot of value there, and she thought so too. So that's you have to work through those nuances of the relationship, but again, bring it back to it's just business, and the idea of team building and team engagement. If they're not engaged, they're, like you said, they're not an employee, so they have to, you have to decide and they have to decide, do you want to do the work or not in the business? And if they don't or you don't, then you got to figure out who's going to do the work. So there's a lot there to unpack, but with a candid conversation, it can definitely be done. I think just making sure that you understand the difference between when you're talking as an equity partner and when you're talking as a operating partner. For both of you, you understand where everybody falls, and then you work backwards from there. All right. Happy to talk more about that too if you want to submit through the website or whatever. We can have a more detailed conversation. Actually, about any of this stuff, we've had a lot of good questions so far today. Always happy to talk more with everyone. All right, next question. Last question, actually. It was a short day. Kelly Killingsworth. What are things I should take into consideration when bringing on an investor in my company? What people might I need to help me through the process as well? I have a new logistics/construction business and have an individual who is eager to invest in it. I know him very well. He would like to be included in the company, but only would like to be involved financially. The first investment would be around $11,000 for a dump trailer. I told him we will do this as correctly as possible, aka the ask button on the portal. The trailer would be put to work right away. I guess it might be kind of a Shark Tank deal, but he's family, not a shark. Is bringing him in as an equity partner advisable, or what would you do for this type of investment? Should I set up differently? Yeah, so I have some thoughts about this. So you have to remember there's three ways to finance a business, and that's all we're talking about here is financing, right? Whenever you talk about an investor, you're talking about financing. And there's three ways to finance a business. You can the business can earn the money, and out of profit, out of retained earnings, they can pay for stuff that they need to buy. You could go to the bank and get debt, and then the debt covers the stuff you need to buy so that you can grow the business. Or you can bring on an equity investor the way that you're suggesting here, like on Shark Tank. Those three things in that order are cheapest to most expensive. The cheapest thing you can do is pay out of retained earnings. Use the cash that the company generates to invest in more things and then generate more cash. That's the cheapest equity or cheapest way to finance a business. The second cheapest thing is the debt, right? So debt, usually they'll charge anywhere from if it's a bank, 4 or 5% to call it 9 to 12%, right? Somewhere in there. So, but that's it. As long as you pay your interest and as long as you pay your principal and you live on, you live up to whatever the agreement was with the bank, you don't owe the bank anything beyond what the initial principal was and to follow the rules that you agreed to. So that's your second most inexpensive way to finance the business. And the most expensive way to finance a business is equity. So you have to be really careful with equity because equity seems, it's a little bit of a siren song sort of situation. You kind of get drawn to it because it seems like it would be a really good deal because it seems cheap initially because you don't have to pay. It's not debt, so if everything goes bad, then you don't have to pay it back. You didn't have to earn it because the business doesn't have to be operating. It's just money that just shows up. But then the issue with equity is that equity, you have to remember, is a claim on all future business earnings. So think about that for a second as it relates to the $11,000 dump trailer. If you're in the logistics and construction business, there's logistics and construction businesses that do millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars worth of business. So for $11,000, let's say you gave away 5% of the company to the investor. So for $11,000 at this stage, they got 5% of the company. Now let's say that you generate $200,000 in free cash flow at the end of the year. And now your investor's expecting distributions. 5% of $200,000 is $10,000. So that's 100% return on that investment indefinitely. And that's assuming you only make $200,000 forever in free cash flow. So you can see how that starts to add up really quick, right? That's $200,000 forever. Now it's $500,000 forever, or you have to buy them out at some multiple, which is going to be also not cheap. So equity is expensive. So yeah, just because it's a family member or somebody like that, it's still a shark type relationship. So don't be be aware of that and be concerned with that. So what I would suggest in this situation is what are your other options for financing? Do you have access to bank debt, or do you have access to, $11,000? Credit cards are expensive, but it's cheaper than equity, as I just pointed out. So like, and then how quickly will this dump trailer start to produce cash flow for you? Like, and how quickly will you be able to pay it off? That's another great question as it relates to the equity question. If it's $11,000 now and you'll be able to turn the cash over so you can pay it off in 6 months, well then put it on a credit card, because who cares what the interest rate is for 6 months if you're going to be able to pay the asset off and it's going to continue to generate you cash month and month after year beyond that. So you really have to kind of look at and balance all those things. If you do go into a deal for equity, I would highly suggest that you use a probably some sort of convertible note. That would probably be a good way to start with it. If you use a convertible note, it basically is debt. Like that's how you would write it up, is you'd write it up as debt to the company with the option, depending on what kind of rules you put into your own convertible note, with rules that say, hey, this guy has the option to buy into the company. Sometimes that's how they do it, like to just avoid the question of valuation and how much percentage of the company they get. It really just gives them some sort of proprietary right to buy into the company at the next round. Otherwise, it's just debt, and then you just pay them a principal and interest payment at some point in time. And as long as you pay that off, then they never get their equity position if you write it up that way. So yeah, that's the answer to that one. Convertible notes are great. If you do a quick Google on convertible notes, you'll get kind of a feeling for what that's all about. They're very simple. You can use a lawyer if you want to, but there's a pretty good standard verbiage in there that you can probably get a hold of and just kind of use, especially if it's family. Okay, so I think that's probably about it. I don't have anything more on my sheet here. So as usual, it's been fun talking to you guys. And if you want to talk to me directly about any of this stuff, happy to chat with anybody. Just reach out through the portal. And that's it. We'll see you guys next time.